Hi everyone, welcome back to Kim Help ASAP. Today we are going to learn how to convert units that are squared. So commonly you find this when you're measuring areas. So you might measure a house in square feet, but need to convert that to square meters. How do you do that? Well, grab your calculator, keep watching, because I'm going to show you how. Okay, let's work our first problem. It reads, how many centimeters squared are in 3.90 meters squared? So this is a pretty simple conversion from meters squared to centimeters squared. I am going to start with what I was given. I was given 3.90 meters squared. The first thing I'm going to deal with is the meters. I want to convert from meters to centimeters. I know that there are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. So I'm first going to write my conversion factor like so. However, meters squared cannot cancel with simply meters. So once I have converted from meters to centimeters, now I am going to deal with my squared function. To do this, I am going to square my denominator, which means I must also square my numerator. So here is my final conversion factor. You can see I have meters squared in the denominator and centimeters squared in the numerator. Now the key thing to remember is I have to square this 100 as well. What you have to be careful about is this squared applies not only to the unit, but also to the number in front of the unit. Now down here in the denominator, when you have 1 squared, that's fine. That's simply just 1. But up here in the numerator, you are going to have 100 squared. So you're not simply squaring the unit, but you are squaring the number that comes with the unit as well. So my meters squared cancels. I'm going to be left with centimeters squared in the numerator, which is exactly what the problem asked for. So let me show you how to put this in your calculator. You are going to take 3.90. You are going to multiply by 100 squared. The final answer is 3.90 times 10 to the 4th centimeters squared. Let's do another problem. A guinea pig enclosure is advertised at being 2,500 inches squared. You need at least 15 feet squared. Is this enclosure large enough for your guinea pigs? So in this case, we need to convert from inches squared to feet squared. I want to know how many feet squared this enclosure is so I can compare it to my minimum requirement. I'm going to start with what I was given, my 2,500 inches squared. The first thing I'm going to deal with is converting just inches into feet, and then I will deal with the squared portion. So here is my conversion factor. There are 12 inches in 1 foot. However, inches will not cancel with inches squared, so now I need to deal with the squared portion. So I'm going to square my denominator and square my numerator. Again, this means that the 12 here is also squared and the 1 is also squared. Now my units cancel. Inches squared cancels with inches squared, and I'm left with feet squared, which is exactly what I need to compare to this 15 feet squared. Let's put it in the calculator. I'm going to take 2,500. I'm going to divide by 12 squared. Remember that squared is in the denominator. This gives me 17 feet squared. So yes, this enclosure is large enough for guinea pigs because I have more than 15 feet squared. Let's work some more problems. This problem reads, convert 7.14 times 10 to the 9th centimeters squared to kilometers squared. While you can go directly from centimeter squared to kilometer squared, I'm going to show this in 2 steps so that I can show you how to deal with these squared conversions with multiple steps. Starting with what I was given, the 7.14 times 10 to the 9th centimeters squared. Just like before, the first thing I'm going to deal with is the centimeters, and then I will deal with the squared. So my first conversion factor is going to be from centimeters to meters. Here is my conversion factor. There are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. However, now I need to deal with the squared portion. So I'm going to square the denominator and square the numerator. Now my centimeters squared cancel, and I have converted into meters squared. However, I'm not finished because, of course, I have to go to kilometers squared. So now I'm going to tack on another conversion factor. Just like before, I'm going to focus on the meters to kilometers conversion first, then I will deal with the squared portion. Here's my conversion factor. There are 1,000 meters in 1 kilometer. However, I need my meters squared to cancel, so I'm going to square the denominator, square the numerator. Now my meters squared cancels, and I have converted into kilometers squared. Now let's put this in the calculator. I'm going to take my 7.14 times 10 to the 9th. I'm dividing by 100 squared. Again, make sure this squared ends up in your denominator. Then I'm going to divide by 1,000 squared, which means I'm going to take this very large number and it should end up being a very small number. And for my final answer, I get 0.714 kilometers squared, which makes sense. Let's do another problem. An apartment is listed as being 1,575 feet squared. How many meters squared is this apartment? Okay, so now I'm doing a conversion that not only has a squared portion, but I'm going from feet to meters, which means I'm going from imperial units to metric units. Again, this is going to be a multi-step process. Here is a chart of multiple conversion factors that will let me move between metric and imperial, or I should say imperial to metric, either way. I'm first going to see if I have a conversion factor from feet to meters, and you can see I do not. So I'm going to have to string together several conversion factors so that I can go from feet to meters. Well, I'm really quite drawn to this first one, which will take me between centimeters and inches. So I know that I can take feet to inches fairly easily. And then, of course, I can convert to centimeters. And then once I'm in centimeters, then I can get to meters. So it looks like I'm going to string together 3 conversion factors for this problem. Let's get started. Here is the number the problem gave me, 1,575 feet squared. Let me deal with the feet to inches first, and then I'll deal with the squared. Here's my conversion factor. In 1 foot, there are 12 inches. Okay, now I need to deal with the squared portion. So I'm going to square the denominator, square the numerator. Again, making sure that this 12 also gets squared. Now my feet squared are going to cancel. This takes me into inches squared. Next, I am going to use this conversion factor right here to convert inches into centimeters. Here's my conversion factor. In 1 inch, there are 2.54 centimeters. Now let's deal with the squared. So I'm going to square my denominator, square my numerator. Again, this number, this 2.54, also gets squared. Now my inches squared cancel, and I am left with centimeters squared. I have one more conversion because I really need to get to meters squared. So here is my final conversion factor. There are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. Now let's deal with the squared portion. So I'm going to square the denominator, square the numerator. Now centimeters squared cancels, and I'm left with meters squared. Okay, let's put this in our calculator. I'm going to take my 1,575. I'm going to multiply by 12 squared. Don't forget the squared. Then I'm going to multiply by 2.54, also squared. And finally, I am dividing by 100 squared. My final answer is 146.3 meters squared. So you can see in this problem, while we didn't have a direct conversion from feet to meters, we could still use what we had and what we know to get to the unit that we needed. This is often true when you're taking a test or a quiz and you may not have a direct conversion, but as long as you can string together appropriate conversion factors, you can use as many steps as you want. Last problem. How many feet squared is 2.045 times 10 to the 5th micrometers squared? This is definitely going to be a multi-step problem. You can see I've got my conversion factors right here. And again, it's looking like I need this top one between centimeters and inches is going to be the best fit. So my plan of action is to take micrometers squared into simply meters squared. Once I'm in meters squared, I can get to centimeters squared, which means I can use this conversion factor to get to inches squared. Once I'm in inches squared, I can then go to feet squared. This is going to be quite a few conversion factors. Let's put them together. Starting with what I was given, 2.045 times 10 to the 5th micrometers squared. Let's deal with the micrometers to meters first, then we'll deal with the squared. Here's my conversion factor. There are 10 to the 6 micrometers in 1 meter. Now to make sure my squared cancels, I'm going to square the denominator and I'm going to square the numerator. Now my micrometers squared cancels and I'm left with meters squared. From here, I am going to convert into centimeters squared because ultimately I'm trying to use this conversion factor right here. So here's my conversion factor. There are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. Now let's deal with the squared portion. So I'm going to square the denominator, square the numerator. This allows me to cancel my meters squared, and now I'm left in centimeters squared. I'm getting closer, but I'm not quite there yet. Now I need to take my centimeters squared to inches. Again, I'm using this conversion factor right here. Here is my conversion factor. There are 2.54 centimeters in 1 inch, but now I need to deal with the squared portion. So square the denominator, square the numerator. Now my centimeters squared cancels, and I have converted into inches squared. I'm getting closer, but I've got to get to feet squared, so I need one more conversion factor to take me from inches to feet. Here we go. There are 12 inches in 1 foot. Now to deal with the squared, I'm going to square the denominator and square the numerator. Finally, my inches squared cancels, and I'm left with feet squared, which is exactly what the problem asked me for. Whew. Okay, now let's put it in our calculator. I'm going to take my 2.045 times 10 to the 5th. I'm going to divide it by 1 times 10 to the 6th squared. Then I'm going to multiply by 100 squared. Divide by 2.54 squared. And finally divide by 12 squared. My final answer is 2.201 times 10 to the negative 6 feet squared. I'm sure if you go to Google, you can find a conversion factor that will take you from micrometers to feet, and then you just square it, and you could do this in one step. But I do want to show how it's okay if you don't always know the exact conversion factor in one step. As long as you can string together your conversion factors and cancel your units, you will get the same answer. Again, be careful when you have a number in the denominator that you are squaring it in the denominator. That is a very common mistake. So if you find that you have set these up but you are getting the wrong answer, check and make sure that you're taking these numbers in the denominator and squaring them in the denominator, not simply dividing by 10 to the 6th, hitting enter, and then squaring. That is going to give you a completely different answer. So just watch those parentheses. Many students feel lost the first time they have to deal with a unit that is squared. But hopefully after these problems, you're more confident in how to do any types of these conversions. Now, if you want to see other types of conversions, you can check out these videos here. And thanks so much for watching.